Welcome to the Have Mandolin Will Travel podcast. This is Picking Poor Robin Clean, Sinners 2025. There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. In ancient Ireland they were called Fili. In Choctaw land they called them firekeepers, and in West Africa they're called griots. The music can bring healing to their communities, but it also attracts evil. In May, James and I went to see Ryan Coogler's Sinners on the strength of some really good word of mouth and quite liking Coogler's other films Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Black Panther. There are others, but those are the ones I had seen. Coogler has at least co-writing credit on all of these, by the way. Sinners is a period piece set in 1932 in the Mississippi Delta in the black sharecropping town of Clarksdale. Taking place over the course of a single day, it follows young blues musician Sammy Moore and the prodigal Smokestack twins, a.k.a. Elijah and Elias Moore, as they open their own juke joint for the community. It deals with ideas of identity, connection with cultural heritage, assimilation, and the specter of Jim Crow. Oh, and vampires show up about halfway through. Weirdly, of the 6 movies I've seen in the theater in the last 2 years, 3 of them were vampire movies. The Last Voyage of the Demeter, Nosferatu, and now Sinners. I don't have a larger point here, it's just odd. Sinners was a critical and commercial hit, grossing at least triple its $100 million or so budget. No small feat in 2025 for a non-sequel, non-franchise, non-pre-existent IP film. But does it really justify all the... Yes, it does. Seriously, if you're listening to this and haven't seen it, please consider stopping right here and watching it. It hits streaming the first weekend of July. I'm not going to avoid spoilers. Quick plot speedrun. Identical twins, Smoke and Stack, both played by Michael B. Jordan, return to Clarksdale and purchase an old sawmill with money they've brought back from their sojourn working in organized crime in Chicago, intending to open their own juke joint. They recruit their cousin Sammy, played by Miles Catton, and others in town to play music, provide food, work the door, etc. Smoke reconnects with his old love Annie, Wunmi Mosaku, a hoodoo practitioner and the mother of his deceased infant daughter, and Stack reconnects with his white-passing ex-girlfriend Mary, played by Haley Steinfeld, herself in town from Arkansas for her mother's funeral. When night falls, the juke opens, and Sammy's music, as the opening narration quoted above prefigures, breaks down the barriers between the community's past and future. The Clarksdale participants don't consciously see this, but the visuals and music are incredibly striking and compelling for the viewer. I have yet to see a review that doesn't single this scene out for effusive and deserved praise. Just as Sammy's song finishes, the Irish vampire Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, arrives outside with 2 white clan members he has recently turned into the undead. Well, maybe he's Irish. I'll get to it. They appear to just be 3 normal, if intense, white people bearing a banjo, a fiddle, and a guitar. The twins turn them away, but they linger outside as they cannot enter without an invitation. Mary, after learning the twins aren't making the money they need to keep the juke going beyond a few weeks, goes out to talk to Remick and his crew to see if they have money to spend. She is attacked and turned into a vampire. She goes back to the juke, and the door guy, Cornbread, invites her in. She lures Stack into a private room and bites him, but is interrupted by Smoke, who shoots her. She runs outside, and Smoke, mourning his now-dead brother, sends all the townsfolk home, unwittingly sending them straight to the vampires outside. Smoke, Sammy, Annie, and a handful of other characters end up trapped inside the juke, facing down an army of vampires. I'll just leave the summary with all hell breaks loose. Part 1. Filmmaking thoughts. This is a really well-done film that succeeds in basically every way a film can. Cast and characters. The performances in this film were universally good and frequently fantastic. I don't remember ever seeing even a so-so performance in a Coogler film, so I suspect that, in addition to casting quality actors, he is a skilled actor's director. It certainly helps that the characters in Sinners are well written, being both well realized and feeling like they have histories that inform who they are, which no doubt makes it easier for an actor to deliver a compelling performance. These histories are not super explicit and are a little fuzzy, but they are definitely there, and I appreciate that there's no stopping the story to inelegantly exposit character lore. To quote Dan Olson from his video essay, Earthsea and Adaptation Sickness, regarding Ursula Le Guin's world building in her Earthsea books, quote, "The best way to handle world building is by under-explaining it. The key to doing it well is to have people explain the important stuff, but also leave a lot of unimportant stuff unexplained. This is where Le Guin's work shines. The Earthsea books do a masterful job at building a rich world with deeply realized cultures, all while walking the fine line of explanation, communicating the details without blatant info dumps," unquote. Olson was discussing world building, but I think the point is instructive when thinking about characters as well. Character writing is just world building for a person, after all. Apparently there's some Easter eggs in the form of newspaper clippings in the Sinners Spotify page that exposit a little bit on the history of the twins and the vampire Remick, but as those are not part of the whole text of the film, I'm not going to talk about them here. As I get older and grumpier, I've decided fixation on wiki-style lore minutia is the root of a lot of modern media illiteracy. The, quote, plot cell mindset I referenced in my Tosca review, where a person only engages in the most literal surface way with the story's plot, and only its plot, is adjacent to this. Plot cells probably hate this movie. The GOAT. To me, the obvious standout performance in a sea of good performances is Michael B. Jordan as the Smokestack Twins. Jordan makes them very legible as different characters that you can easily tell apart even after the production design signifiers like Stack's maroon brimmed cap and Smoke's blue flat cap at the beginning are gone. Smoke and Stack have very different demeanors, but to me they still feel like variations on a theme. Despite how different they are on the surface, Stack smiles, Smoke doesn't, they feel like they could have come from the same household and are molded from the same stuff. It's impressive how real and affectionate their relationship feels, considering they're being played by one person who, obviously, wasn't interacting with himself in real time. Also, I like the show-off shot when they are first introduced. When we first see them, they are waiting by a car and they pass a cigarette back and forth. It's seamless, and they really look like they're interacting. There's another impressive shot early on when the twins are driving with Sammy, the camera looking back from the dashboard and focused on Sammy in the back center seat in the middle of the frame, while both Smoke and Stack are visible in the driver and passenger seats in the foreground. Having several of these kind of shots early on almost tricks your brain into forgetting that this is movie magic. If the movie had set a different precedent at the beginning by obviously contriving reasons to keep them apart in the frame to make shooting easier, I think my suspension of disbelief would have been diminished. Between the cinematography and the performance, if I didn't know who Jordan was, and you told me this part was played by actual twins, I would have believed you. Edit from future me. Weeks after writing that bit, I was talking about this film with someone who didn't know who Michael B. Jordan was, and sure enough, he thought Smoke and Stack were played by actual twins. How he didn't know who Michael B. Jordan was is beyond the scope of this piece, or of reason. The Chupacabra and the Witch. Another performance I've seen rightly singled out is Jack O'Connell as Remick. He plays the vampire with a charismatic presence and an easy smile that's just a little too intense to be anything other than off-putting. Even when his eyes aren't glinting red or he's not covered in blood, there's an underlying threat to him that is deeply unsettling. Remick is the best kind of villain in this type of elevated horror. He wants something articulable and absolutely believes he's doing the right thing, and O'Connell really sells it. Also, O'Connell apparently did his own singing for the 3 songs the vampires perform, Pick Poor Robin Clean, Rocky Road to Dublin, and Will You Go Lassie Go, and he sounds great. He also does Irish dancing during Rocky Road to Dublin, which is pretty cool, in a fairly horrifying scene. On the other end of the supernatural spectrum, I think Wunmi Masaku as Annie also turned in a really compelling performance. You can feel the sense of loss in her, and yet also the resolve. This could have been a really functional and stock character who's just there to explain to everyone else what a vampire is, but she wasn't. Annie even gets some of the only tender moments out of Smoke, and they feel earned. This last thing applies to the cast in general, the humans anyway, but I really appreciate that they seem legitimately unnerved when Remick shows up, and genuinely terrified when the breadth of what they're facing becomes clear. No one is too cool for any of this, in contrast to the tension-destroying trends in a lot of movies the last decade or so. If the characters are too badass to have human reactions to apocalyptic revelations, why should the audience be invested in the danger? The new Jurassic World movies are probably the most obvious example of this, especially when compared to the original Jurassic Park ones. Some cinematography stuff I thought was cool. So much of the first half of Sinners is in the bright daylight, and knowing there were going to be vampires eventually, there was this subtle tension building in the back of my mind when the shadows started to lengthen and sunset approached. Also, the shot of the setting sun where Remick first appears is a really beautiful shot and would almost be idyllic if it wasn't the consummation of a looming threat. I also very much loved the shot of Smoke, Stack, and Sammy driving their car down the road through the endless cotton fields, framed so the car is going away from the camera towards the vanishing point on the horizon. It feels like the final shot of a film, where the characters head happily into a future of endless possibility. Of course, that's not this film, and they're headed towards the juke, nightfall, and death. I really like how the vampires look. They are mostly normal, but in moments of coiled threat, when their predatory nature is about to burst out, their eyes take on a slight red glint. It's frightening. And special hat tip to the way Remick's attack on Mary is framed, with a focus on her in the foreground as she walks quickly away, and him just starting to lift off the ground in the middle distance before it cuts away. At that point, the viewer knows what's about to happen, but the execution still caught me off guard. Music. Perhaps not surprisingly for a movie so focused on music, the score is really good and interesting. There's a lot of Delta blues motifs, though not always played on the guitar. The first shot of Sammy's guitar has a really heavy string version of a blues riff, which gives it the extra dramatic weight that orchestral scoring can lend. There's also a neat moment early on that teases an electric guitar, which initially stuck out as anachronistic as the rest of the score instrumentation was either orchestral or period appropriate, but it was actually some clever foreshadowing for the scene later. Speaking of which, the scene. I lied to you. As I alluded to earlier, the scene where Sammy breaks down the barriers between past and present is a highlight and the centerpiece of the film. The opening narration quoted above telegraphs this is coming, but it played out in a way that I wasn't expecting, both sonically and visually. The scene is centered around Sammy playing his Delta blues song, I Lied to You. Sammy's actor, Miles Catton, is an accomplished blues musician, and he's the one actually singing this. And he's pretty awesome. Should have mentioned this earlier, but in addition to the singing, Catton gives a fantastic performance too, extra impressive since this is his first film. The song starts with just Sammy's voice and guitar. Soon the juke patron, swaying along, starts stomping the beat, and veteran bluesman Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, always a pleasure to see him and stuff, joins in on the piano. There's a quick flashback to Slim telling Sammy, "Blues wasn't forced on us like that religion. No, sir, we brought that from home. It's magic what we do. It's sacred and big." Then the ambient sound starts to fade as Sammy sings and the patrons dance, leaving only the sound of the music. The opening narration repeats and we see and hear a West African man in a traditional garb playing, I think, a zalam among the patrons. Then a Jimi Hendrixian electric guitarist shows up, then a DJ, and then a modern beat drops. The original Delta blues song we're hearing blends all the traditional, period, and modern instruments together. Rappers, breakdancers, djembe players, all the people from different time periods dance and perform together. This isn't just limited to the black characters either. Bo and Grace Chow dance while a traditional Chinese dancer spins around them. It culminates with Sammy holding a high note while the camera pans up and the roof of the juke erupts into fire, burning away the ceiling and revealing the stars. The scene is unexpected, unique, and ecstatic. As it goes on, gospel-tinged vocalizations come in, making it feel like a charismatic revival meeting, which it is. And especially in the theater, it is spellbinding. It's also the event that triggers the entire back half of the film. After the building ignites, the camera moves through the revelry, now happening under the open sky amid the burning juke, and pulls back until the entire juke is visible, and then back still more, only stopping when Remick and his two thralls enter the frame. The spell is broken, and Remick and company walk up to the no longer burning juke. Honorable mention: Rocky Road to Dublin and other diegetic music. For me, the other standout musical scene is when Remick, outside the juke among his new horde of vampires, sings Rocky Road to Dublin, an Irish traditional. It's an incredible arrangement of the song, starting with a slow a cappella rendition of the second half of verse 1 over some tense low drones before the fiddle comes in and the tempo picks up. While Remick sings, his thralls circumambulate around him while clapping and grinning. The thralls take up the next verse while Remick does some Irish dancing. Everyone is covered in blood and gore, and the blocking and choreography make it take on the aspect of a pagan ritual as the music crescendos. It's a distorted, cracked mirror version of I Lied to You. Rather than communal, it's cultic, and like in I Lied to You, the end of Rocky Road is layered with gospel vocalizations, which give it a similar charismatic revival feel, but the entire atmosphere of this scene is different. If I Lied to You is ecstatic, Rocky Road to Dublin is what the academics would call fucking demented. It manages to be extremely threatening, but still pretty compelling and almost hypnotic. The vampires honestly all look like they're having a lot of fun. More on this later. I Lied to You is my most memorable set piece in the entire film, but Rocky Road is definitely second. All the diegetic music, i.e. the music the characters can also hear, as opposed to, say, the score, is great. I really like the blues, and as mentioned earlier, Catton sounds fantastic. Bonus: Wild Mountain Time in film language. Before they've revealed their true nature to the Clarksdale residents and are still trying to con their way inside the juke, Remick and his two vampire friends play the most threatening version of Wild Mountain Time I've ever experienced. The arrangement and performance of this rather beautiful song is actually pretty straight up. The menace is achieved through context and filmic language. It's an interesting case study in how connotation can affect meaning. This also applies to Rocky Road to Dublin, which if you listen to the soundtrack version, isolated from the visuals, is perhaps more intense than most standard versions, but doesn't feel apocalyptic like it does in the film. Part 2. Writing and Themes. Vampirism.
Vampirism is, and always has been, a layup for social commentary.
Was Bram Stoker making a statement about aristocracy by making Dracula a count and most of his pursuers common folk? I don't know, but I've definitely seen that argued. Marx in Das Kapital and Engels in The Condition of the Working Class in England certainly were explicitly using vampires as a criticism of capitalism. Both of these predate Stoker's book by decades, which speaks to the pervasiveness of vampires in folklore even before Stoker's hugely popularizing novel. Sinner's use of vampires as commentary is not at all subtextual. I want to say it's not even subtle, but it's handled extremely deftly, and it doesn't feel like a clumsy sledgehammer of didactic exposition. Vampires, of course, are predatory and a force of ravening desire to consume. and by that consumption they not only erase people but convert and change them. In Sinners, Remick is a force of cultural appropriation, co-option, and erasure. Note, I'm potentially drifting out of my lane here a little bit, but the following are the impressions I had while watching the film. On the wider metaphorical level, it is not a coincidence that Remick and his friends show up right when the black characters are connecting with their past and future. It has echoes of the disruptions of cultural continuity that occurred when ethnically diverse Africans from wide geographic origins were subjected to the Middle Passage and scattered in the New World, and the pervasive family separation inflicted on enslaved people. Or perhaps of the looming violence implicit in old slave codes that prevented more than 4 enslaved people from meeting with each other. In the film, it also prefigures the explicit violence of the Klan, who have taken notice of the gathering and will arrive the next day. But Remick is here not only to interrupt the gathering, but also to co-opt it. The vampire's first ploy to get invited into the juke is to audition by singing Pick Poor Robin Clean, which is an African-American Delta blues song. In their hands, it sounds so much like an Appalachian folk / proto-bluegrass tune that I had no idea it was a blues song until I looked it up later. Even more subtly, Remick is playing the banjo here, which is a whole other layer of appropriation, as the banjo has its origins in West Africa and was recreated in the Americas by the enslaved population. So Remick is playing a whiteified version of a black song on an instrument so thoroughly co-opted from the black population that I would guess many people don't even realize its origins. It's telling that later, during Rocky Road to Dublin, his horde of mostly black vampires take up the singing of an Irish traditional for him while he dances, and their gospel vocalizations from I Lied to You are co-opted into the decidedly ungospel song Rocky Road to Dublin. They are his now, and they sing his songs. Remick tells the survivors holed up in the juke, I am your way out. This world already left you for dead. Won't let you build, won't let you fellowship. We will do just that. Together. Forever. You ain't safe here. No matter how many guns or how much money, they gonna take it from you when they want. They was always gonna kill you. I happen to show up at the right place at the right time. And Vampire Joan adds, we gonna start a new clan based on love. And on the surface, I can see why Remick wouldn't think this was a terrible argument to make. As I mentioned earlier, all his thralls do seem to be having fun, and he is telling the truth about the clan coming to take everything from them. I also believe his early, Sir, we believe in equality in music line from his first conversation with Smoke to be actually sincere. He does mean it, but for the Clarksdale residents, Remick's colorblind utopia comes at the price of destroying who they were forever. They can be equal, but they will sing his songs from now on. A really interesting aspect of this film I was absolutely not expecting is that Remick himself is a victim of cultural disruption. The reason he is drawn to the juke gathering and desperately wants Sammy is that he is cut off from his own barely remembered culture. I want to see my people again. I'm trapped here, but your gifts can bring them to me. And tying into the theme of erasure, it is strongly implied that the Irish culture Remick's proselytizing with isn't even his. Late in the film, while saying the Lord's Prayer along with Sammy, he says, Long ago, the men who stole my father's land forced these words upon us. I hated those men, but the words still bring me comfort. This could be interpreted to mean that Remick may be from the pre-Christian history of probably the British Isles. Remick then serves as a warning about forced assimilation and erasure and highlights the importance of what Sammy was doing for his people at the juke. I like that Remick isn't there just because of bloodlust, and his motivation directly intersects with the cultural ideas the film is exploring. He is a victim too, similar to how Mina characterizes Dracula in Dracula. Note that I am absolutely not saying, which I've seen some deeply strange people say online, that Remick is actually a tragic hero, which I think is an absolutely batshit take. He is absolutely a monster and a villain. He's just a highly motivated and charismatic one. Power, domain, and invasion. Another thing I thought was interesting was how the film portrayed Remick's reaction to not being invited in after he played Pick Poor Robin Clean. He bristles at not being invited into a minority space with, we were sounding damn near perfect and you saying we ain't welcome? And when Smoke tells him, no, I'm saying you get down the road and get back to town. Plenty of white barrelhouses there. Remick gives an incredulous, oh, this 'cause we're white. It feels very true to how I've seen people in majority groups try to get into minority spaces and then call racism when they aren't immediately welcomed with open arms. It quickly turns into the who's the real racist argument I mentioned in my piece on Yellowface. I don't know if it's anachronistic for Mississippi in the 1930s, but it feels authentic to me as I've seen variations of that conversation play out in online spaces in the 2020s. Remick says, can't we just for one night just all be family? This is a way to put the moral burden on the people at the juke, casting them as unreasonably rejecting someone who just wanted to, be friends, man. Of course, Remick isn't telling the truth. It won't be for one night. The bitten can never go back, and he's not interested in amity on any terms but his. The film really shows the power dynamic between the two groups of people. Smoke, Stack, and company are in a bit of a bind with regards to letting Remick in. Stack legitimately seemed to enjoy their performance and is perhaps open to the idea of letting them in, saying to Smoke, "What if they just came here to sing?" But Smoke replies with, "And what if somebody spills something on them? Step on their shoe. Look at their woman a bit too long. We're going to have a bigger problem than just a fight." He's right, of course. The social power gulf between them and Remick is huge, and almost guarantees Remick and company will dictate the terms, even if they don't realize it. It doesn't matter that there's only 3 of them. They will, by default, have the law, the authority, and the system on their side, no matter what they say. Slim's earlier story about his friend being lynched over made-up tale so the authorities could take his money proves that. The anxiety about their disempowerment and the knife's edge they are always on in Mississippi also comes out when Mary comes to the juke. Stack tries to convince her to leave, saying, "All it'd take is the wrong person in here to see you. Word get back to them crackers and they're going to try to kill you." I also very much like how the film reveals that the safety of the juke is an illusion. Grace, who invites the vampires in, makes a pretty valid point. Why let the vampires go kill everyone in town? Even if the people are still in the juke, make it until dawn, the vampires will just come back tomorrow. They can't just hunker down and hope they won't be hurt. It's too big. Any passive reprieve will only be temporary. They have to be actively fought. Tonight. This echoes the clan subplot. Hogwood, who sold the twins the sawmill, is the grand dragon of the clan. He sold it to them one day, and they may have a safe night, but he and his men will return to kill them the next day. Or the next. And like Grace, Smoke chooses not to run and hide until the next time the clan comes knocking. He takes the fight to them. Part 3. Gallimaufry. Smoke's clan bloodbath the morning after Remick is destroyed is really satisfying. I could watch Michael B. Jordan obliterate clan members all day. Also, Smoke's fatal bullet wound looks a lot like the vampire bite wounds in the film. Allegory, folks. I am curious why Coogler chose to make Smoke and Stack identical twins. It must be important because it would have been a massive pain in the ass to do. Then again, maybe he just thought, man, Michael rules. I want him to play more parts in this movie. The lyrics to Pick Poor Robin Clean are appropriate when being sung by vampires. I picked poor Robin clean, picked poor Robin clean. I picked his head, I picked his feet. I would have picked his body, but it wasn't fit to eat. Oh, I picked poor Robin clean, picked poor Robin clean. And I'll be satisfied having a family. Lord, didn't that jaybird laugh when I picked poor Robin clean. I also like that there is a reprise of the song later by the whole group of vampires, this time as an overt threat/taunt to the people still in the juke. It's cool that all 3 of the peoples mentioned in the opening, the Irish, the Choctaw, and the West Africans, are present in the film, even if the Choctaw are only briefly shown hunting Remick before they flee at sunset. It's also noteworthy that the power through music ability is not confined to non-white people, though it's probably telling that only the Irish have a singular country. Choctaw land isn't really Choctaw land anymore, and West Africa encompasses a huge array of people, and in the American context, West African is about as precise as most enslaved or formerly enslaved people can get. I didn't pick this up on my first watch, but Grace and Bo Chow's daughter Lisa code switches. Her 2 lines at the black grocery store are in a distinct Chinese accent, but once she goes across the street to the white grocery store where her mother works, she speaks with her parents' southern accent. I was surprised when Stack and Mary showed up in the epilogue, having survived the destruction of the vampires, though I probably should have seen it coming. In retrospect, it should have been a tell that we didn't see either of them in the final confrontation with Remick and his brood outside the juke. There was a lot going on in that scene. It was authentically tense, and I was emotionally invested enough in the Sammy, Smoke, Remick characters that I didn't notice Stack and Mary's absence. It would have been kind of a weird anticlimax to have 2 main characters like Stack and Mary just facelessly die in the crowd. I might have done this metatextual detective work in a less compelling film, but as it stands, I didn't notice, and I had a nice surprise at the end. It's interesting that Mary describes her grandfather as half black rather than half white. I like how Remick's line that long ago the men who stole my father's land forced these words upon us is an echo of Delta Slim's line earlier that blues wasn't forced on us like that religion. Hey look, it's Buddy Guy as Sammy in the epilogue. Also, the club he's in is called Perlene's, after the woman Sammy, connects with before the vampires arrive. I love Sammy's poignant and elegiac line to Stack. You know something? Maybe once a week I wake up paralyzed reliving that night. But before the sun went down, I think that was the best day of my life. These are the kind of vampires whose ecology doesn't really make much sense. This is not a criticism. I'm not CinemaSins. Any vampire who creates another one every time they bite someone, and it only takes a few minutes to turn here, would overrun the earth in like a week and a half. It's not an infrequent mechanic of the genre, though, and it doesn't bother me even a little bit. I just think it's kind of funny. Like when zombie stories start with a protagonist waking up from a coma having missed the apocalypse because no writer wants to explain how unarmed, shambling bodies who spread infection by biting people could overwhelm the world's militaries. There's only one incredibly minor thing that is a little off from an editing perspective, and that's the sort of jarring dissolve cut after Hogwood, the man who sells the twins the sawmill, says, "Clan don't exist no more." It's kind of abrupt, and I think it was the only dissolve in the film, or at least it's the only one that lodged in my brain. To be fair, I didn't even notice it in the theater, but I think on a rewatch, it really stood out because it was so out of step with how the rest of the movie was edited. The fact that this piddly shit is basically the only critique I've got is an indicator of how good I think this movie is. Smoke and Stack aren't saints. They're the type that 21st century internet culture would dig through the past of and decide it doesn't matter what vampires or power structures do to them because they've broken laws so they deserve it. I really like the tension when the newly turned cornbread is trying to get invited back into the juke despite being the door guy not 10 minutes earlier. Overall, I'd say this film was more tense than outright scary. I like Smoke's early scene with Annie. In it, he lays out his bleak philosophy. "I've been all over this world, in cars, ships, trains. I seen men die ways I didn't even know was possible. I never saw no roots, no demons, no ghosts, no magic. Just power." When he says roots, he's literally talking about the plant roots Annie uses for her hoodoo, but it also works with the idea of cultural continuity and disruption that the film is about. The scene is a good microcosm of how the film's characters have an inner world and a history that makes them feel real without giving large info dumps. Smoke and Stack both served their country in World War I and then returned to be second-class citizens, and God knows what they saw in the trenches. Part 4. Conclusion. Sinners is not only the best thing I saw in the theater in 2025, as of mid-September anyway, it's also the best movie I've seen in a while. It is absolutely deserving of the accolades it received, and if you somehow got this far and haven't seen it, do consider making the time to check it out, even if you aren't a horror fan. As I said, once the vampires showed up, it's very tense and honestly kind of emotionally stressful, but it isn't that scary. It is sharply written, looks great, sounds great, the performances are riveting, and it handles its social commentary with great facility and nuance. 10 out of 10. I eagerly await Coogler's next film. Originally published September 14th, 2025.